What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. So we're here back in the shop, and go figure, there's another Mustang in here. So this is a really good buddy of mine's car. I picked this thing up a couple years back, and it's developed a small engine tick on the driver's side. I believe it's in the top end. So it's got a 5-liter in it. This is in 86, so it is fuel injected, and what we're gonna do now is start ripping the top end of the motor off. We need to pull the intake and everything so we can pull the valve covers, and hopefully we're going to find a bent push rod or just a lifter or a rocker arm, just out of our spec. So yeah, we're going to try and dig into it and see if we can help them out. Or worst case scenario, we got a 351 block over in the shelf there. We've got a full Holley sniper set up and distributor and everything. So worst case scenario, we're going to rob some parts off of this motor. We're going to put it on that one and go. But yeah, hopefully we can get them one more season and come up to next winter, and we can go and put all of this stuff on that motor and make a whole bunch more horsepower. So enough talking, let's dig into it and see if we can find this noise. So here's under hood, and this thing is typical of what you're going to find on a Foxbody Mustang. It's got heads, AFR 185. It's got a cam, which he was told is an E cam, which is a really old Alphabet cam, but hey, they work great. It's got a GT40 manifold, and it's got a cold air tube. So like I said, it's typical of what you're going to find, but I believe that the noise is coming from the valve cover on the driver's side. Obviously you can't get the valve cover off because the intake's in the way, so we're going to start with pulling the cold air tube. We're going to pull the upper manifold off. We can leave the lower, and we're going to try and pull the valve covers and see if we can find anything under there. So yeah, let's start pulling it apart. Alright, so in a matter of 15 or so minutes, as you can see, we got the intake off, and it's not that hard. There's 6 bolts that run up the center there, and yeah, like I said, there's 6 bolts, 2 in the front, 2 in the middle, 2 in the back. That pulls the center off. You got a couple vacuum lines across the back, and the manifold's off. So now what we want to do is grab a 7/16 or 11 millimeter socket, and we're going to zip off the 6 bolts for each valve cover and take a peek inside and see what we see. Alright, so we got the 6 bolts out of the valve covers. There's 3 on the top, 3 on the bottom. We're going to pull off this driver's side one. Now, I personally have never seen underneath these valve covers, and I do not think that the owner of the car has either. So, what do we find? We find non-adjustable, what look like stock rockers on here. So that's good and bad. I was hoping that they were going to be an adjustable rocker. Let me get this valve cover out of the way, I'm sorry. I was hoping that what we were going to find was an adjustable rocker, which this isn't. So that doesn't, I was hoping it was just going to be out of adjustment, but that's not going to be a thing. So what we're going to do is pull the valve cover off the passenger side and come back and see if any are super loose. So all you want to do is grab these and kind of twist them like that, front to back, and see if any are super loose. They should all have some tension on them, which they all do on this driver's side. So now just feeling to see if I can feel any springs that are broken. We're going to do the same on the passenger side. And nothing. So they all feel okay. So now we're going to go one step further, and I'm going to pull each one of the rocker arms off. And because these are a factory style, let me zoom you in here. Because these are a factory style rocker, you can just zip them off. And then I want to pull the push rods and make sure none of them are bent. And to put these back on, you just torque them down. So there's no adjustment. You don't have to have the motor sitting, you know, doesn't have to be top dead center or anything like that to start doing them. You can just kind of zip them down. So yeah, like I said, we're going to pull the rockers and we're going to make sure that none of the push rods are bent. And yeah, after that, it's going to be lower end, which isn't always ideal, but yeah, I guess here we are. So we went through and checked all of the rocker arms. Like I showed, or like I was talking about before, you just kind of twist them left to right and see if they're tight. And then I went through, I removed all the rocker arms, pulled all the push rods out, and rolled them on a piece of material that I knew was flat. All right, so let's catch up on where we were. So I went through and I checked all of the rocker arms. You saw me kind of twist them left and right, just make sure they were all tight. All that was good. I grabbed each valve spring, kind of moved each valve spring around, made sure there wasn't anything loose on those. So those all seemed okay. Then I pulled all the rocker arms off. It's just the one bolt in the center. Grabbed all the push rods out of the motor and I rolled them on a piece of aluminum that I knew was flat. All those came out, like they can roll no problem. They don't get kind of hung up, which if you can imagine trying to roll a banana, it would try to like roll and then it'll stop, and then it'll roll and it'll stop. So if they roll nice and easy, you know that they're not bent. So I threw all those back in, and then I found the culprit. So on these 5 liters, the valve cover kind of hangs over top of the exhaust manifold some, especially if you have those tall valve covers. And on this one, I figured, you know what, last thing here that I can check for top end would be the exhaust bolts. And sure enough, we had a whole bunch of loose exhaust bolts. So I went back and took them all out, pulled the gaskets out, and the gaskets still look like they're in okay shape. Sometimes what will happen is the gasket will like make a little channel where the airflow just kind of like cut through, and then you have to replace them. These looked absolutely perfect, so I put them all back on and tightened the bolts down really well, and now we're ready to reassemble. So right now we're going to clean up the gaskets on the valve cover, toss the valve covers back on, and then we need to clean up the lower intake manifold where the upper goes on. We'll put some RTV, or we're going to use Wright stuff because that's what I have. But yeah, Permatex Wright stuff, it's awesome. It's like a 1-minute gasket. So we'll put some of that on there, drop the upper back on, and we should have this thing back together in, I'm hoping, less than an hour. And then it's ready for the customer to take out of here. So yeah, another one of those quick jobs that, you know, helps keep the lights on. So this is kind of where I left off last night. What I did was just threw a rag down over top the motor so no dust and dirt gets down into it. And as you can see, we already torqued our bolts here in the middle of the rockers. Those torqued down to 23 foot-pounds. So we got that done. And we got our bolts torqued down in the middle of 23 foot-pounds. Now I'm going to pull the, you can see this one here's, this has some oil on it from laying the rockers down. So what we're gonna do is grab a razor blade. We'll scrape all of these surfaces where the gaskets go. We're gonna wipe it down with some lacquer thinner, and we're ready to start reassembling. Alright, so as you can see, we got the valve covers down on here, and I got the 6 bolts. There's 2 in the front, 2 in the middle, 2 in the back. Down on the intake, that's your upper intake manifold. So that's done. Now I went and connected the vacuum line that goes over to the fuel pressure regulator, and this little black one here that goes down into the cabin. I have one here. We'll slide that guy on, and I got a couple wiring connections and the throttle cable to hook up. Now, everything that I like to do, or something that I like to do on all these kind of vacuum lines, is I take a zip tie, wrap a zip tie around the end of it where it's like on that barb, pull it real tight, and then snip it off. That way, if there's, you know, the hose is kind of worn or anything, it just makes sure that it's sealed on there. And I usually do it because on a lot of my stuff I run boost, and if you get boost pressure through there, I don't want a hose blowing off. So it just kind of, it's one of those things that I've just programmed myself into doing now. So something like a vacuum line on a fuel pressure regulator, definitely always do those. This one here, I had one on it prior, so we'll go ahead and put that back on. And then, like I said, I have the wiring connection here for the throttle body. I have a wiring connection here for the IAC, intake air control motor, and we have the cable to hook up on the bottom, and we're about done on this thing. That'll take care of the motor stuff that we're doing right now, and then I'm going to replace the 2, let me jump over. These are battery terminals. You just have a couple nuts and bolts on the top there. Strip the cable, put them in there, clamp them down. These ones are kind of worn that he's got on here, and you know, for the $5, it's just good practice. So we're gonna do that, and that's about it. This thing's ready to go. I think I'll fire it up, get it moved over to the hoist. We're gonna lift it up and do an oil change on it, and yeah, this one's ready to go back to him and back out to service.